Tonight, I think, is a very exceptional evening. We're bringing together much of the leadership from Fort Sam Houston with their distinguished careers who serve our country and keep us free. It's extra special to have Lieutenant General Jeff Buchanan, for he addresses us tonight. But before that, I want to introduce the team that he has brought. Laura Buchanan, this pretty, capable wife, works alongside of him every day. Brigadier General Ned Appenzeller is new to our world. He has come to head out BAMC. We are missing tonight Brigadier General Jeffrey Johnson, who was at BAMC these last years, and he's now very much the Regional Health Command Commanding General, and his wife, Paula. They're stuck getting back from Fort Hood, and they can't be with us tonight. Wonderful people, I want all of you to know. And Brigadier General Laura Sandeman is brand new to us, brand new. Not only pretty, but brand new. She's the commander of the 502 Air Force Base Wing and Joint Base San Antonio. Rear Admiral Rebecca McCormick Boyle is with us, unfortunately soon to be retiring, but she's our naval officer here in San Antonio on the Joint Base. SES Robert Nathan, who is the deputy, kind of, I'd say, the right and left arm of when Buchanan needs one. And then Mark Stammer. Mark's fairly new too. Donna's not here with him, but he's our commander for Army South. And a special thank you, wherever Peter Connor is, and to our lovely Bob Nading. Thank you, Peter Connor, for working so hard to get this together tonight. They didn't leave a stone unturned to make it work. Oh, good, we're increasing. Lieutenant General Jeff Buchanan, Arizona born, University of Arizona graduate, Bachelor of Science in Wildlife Ecology, and Master of Arts in Leadership at the Department of the United States Military Academy. He has served in command and staff positions and command positions of the 82nd Airborne Division, the 25th Infantry Division, the 101st Airborne Division, the 10th Mountain Division, and he has served at the U.S. Military Academy as Director of Operations. 4 tours in Iraq for Jeffrey Buchanan, and 1 in Afghanistan. And before coming here to Fort Sam Houston, he commanded the U.S. Army Military District of Washington, Joint Force Headquarters, National Capital Region. Today he serves as the commander of the United States Army North, 5th Army, and the senior commander of Fort Sam Houston and Camp Bullis. On a personal side, one would suspect that Jeff Buchanan was probably born in South Texas rather than Arizona. He loves hunting, and his treasured impeccable horsemanship lend him to our part of the world. For those of you who hunt, you will appreciate his love of the outdoors and the bird and fowl that seldom escapes his sight. He not only shoots them, but he dresses them and prepares them and brings them home, cooks them himself, and serves them at his and Laura's welcoming table. When he arrived at Fort Sam to take his command, the fine quarter horses came alongside, same time beside them. And after the presentation, we'd like to have questions. I think that's all right, Jeff, right? It would be wonderful for you to look inside more of what's happening with the military, the Army, the Air Force, the Marine Corps. They're all at Navy, all at Fort Sam. He is a man, I believe, of all seasons. He's an exceptional man. He's a soldier that many of us have come to know. And it's a privilege to have Jeff Buchanan and Laura in San Antonio and in South Texas. God bless.
Thanks, Diane. Appreciate it. Thanks, Diana. I really want to thank all of you for being here this evening, and just let you know what an honor and a privilege it is for myself and Laura to be able to address you and talk to you a little bit. And I intend to speak for a while, and then hopefully I'll get some energy going with questions and answers. And for all the hard ones, I'm going to turn them over to the Air Force, the Navy, Army South. But I want to encourage you to get engaged, because we're really, I'd like you to walk away this evening with a much greater understanding of what your military is doing here. And then I'm going to focus my comments on the Army, but I don't want to limit the discussion there, certainly. So the Army, of course, is very important to me. It's very important to our nation. Personally, I'm the son of a soldier. I've got a son who's a soldier. I've now got a grandson who's probably heading in that direction, but he doesn't know it yet. And in one sense, I just want to say it makes me very proud to be the son of a soldier, to be a soldier myself, to have a son who just got back from his 7th combat deployment. But it's also concerning. And this is one of the things I want to talk about. The Army, specifically, but the military in general, is turning into more and more of a family business. And it's something we all should be concerned about. Admiral Mullen, I think, has talked about this in great depth, but we really can't afford to have a family business serving in the military in a representative democracy, because so much of our country will lose contact with the military. And I'm going to share with you some statistics, but here's a quote from Admiral Mullen. "There's a growing disconnect between the American people and the military. The public knows generically that their troops are at war, but the day-to-day connections are less than they used to be. The depth and breadth of who we are and what we're doing isn't there." And when you think about it, here's just one of those statistics. Since the 1980s, the percentage of veterans in Congress has changed. It's been on a continual decline. We peaked at about 75% of the members of Congress were veterans in the 1970s, and today that's less than 18%. Now these are the people who are charged in our Constitution with raising the military. Specifically talks about the Army and the Navy in the Constitution. Of course, we didn't have an Air Force back then, but it's implied. It's their job to raise the military, and it's their job to declare war. And they don't typically have personal connections to the military, so it ought to be concerning. Here's a couple other of our statistics, and again, why this is just to demonstrate why this is a family business, if you will. 79% of soldiers who join the Army come from families that have served in the military. 79%. More than 3/4 of adults over age 50 have a close relative in the military, but that number drops to just 33% for those of ages 18 to 29. And this comes out of the Pew Research Center. So I want to ask a question. How many of you either have served or have a family member who has served in the military? Okay, look around the room for a second. Okay, and you can put your hands down, but San Antonio is atypical. Point number one. Point number two, this particular subset, this group within San Antonio is atypical. So I think it's vitally important for us and you all to understand what's going on in the military today, what's going on. And I'm going to focus my comments on the Army, but we have just as much going on in the Navy and the Air Force and the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard. And I really would like you all just to leave here with a greater understanding, because we depend on you. We depend on you to help maintain contact between the American people and our military. And frankly, we need your help. We need your help to educate others. And so many of you have a personal investment, but again, it's not typical with the leadership of cities across the United States. So while America has been growing more and more disconnected with its military, San Antonio really has not. And there's a reason, and I think a good rationale for why we became and why we were incorporated as Military City USA. And when you look at all that is going on at Lackland Air Force Base, Randolph Air Force Base, Fort Sam Houston, Camp Bullis, there's a number of other small camps and stations that I would be happy to make General Linderman talk about. But we are part of your community. Our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, our Department of the Army and Air Force civilians, you know, we live in your communities. We worship at your churches. Our kids go to your schools. Our kids play sports teams we're all part of your community. And you've opened your arms and welcomed us. And we're very, very grateful for that. And, you know, specifically to my own experience, in events ranging from Fiesta, the rodeo, the Tricentennial, Celebrate America's Military. There's so many different events that we're involved with, and it gives us a chance to meet the leadership of the community and help get a better understanding of you all and your challenges. So we really do appreciate being included. Now, I'm going to talk about the Army and kind of the big picture of the Army, and then I'm going to transition more specifically to what is going on at Fort Sam Houston. So in the Army right now, we have about 187,000 soldiers committed to supporting combatant commanders in 140 countries around the world. And again, it's not something we think about every day, but literally almost every country on the face of the earth has got soldiers, U.S. soldiers in it. About 99,000 of those soldiers are deployed or forward stationed in a country right now that is in combat or close to it. And I'll just give you an example. When I say close to it, I talk about places like Korea, you know, where there's always a threat of an attack at some point in time from the north, and their motto is fight tonight, because that's how they approach the world. They need to be ready to fight tonight. You know, there's not much time off in Korea. In today's complex world with competing powers, transnational terrorist organizations, if you want in the questions and answers, I'll give you our current thinking about the major threats that are out there to our nation's interest, and how that's changed over a couple of years. Proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, something we in my headquarters deals with quite a bit. But the Army remains our nation's primary force to fight and win the nation's wars. Now, we don't do this alone. We always do it as part of a joint team. It's changed a little bit, and kind of where we're headed in how we fight those wars has changed. You know, it used to be dominantly the Air Force and the Navy did things to enable ground operations. And you think back to Desert Storm, you know, a significant air and also maritime campaign, but even though it was naval aviation, a significant air campaign between the Air Force and the Navy set the conditions so that the ground forces could cross into Kuwait and then into Iraq. And that's still viable. But the nature of the threat has changed. And it's changed in such a way that we ground forces may have to set the conditions so that the air forces, Navy and Air Force, can do their job to enable the ground operations. And this is why, you know, how we fight are as part of a joint team. We work together, but the threat has driven us to do different things. Right now, China, for example, has got surface-to-surface weapons that can make our aircraft, that keep our aircraft carriers out of range. So if they come, you know, they can threaten our aircraft carriers at such a range that it's beyond the range of our planes. And again, so this is where the ground forces come back in. If we can put long-range precision fires on those particular threat systems, then we can suppress them to such a point that the carriers can get in, that the Air Force can get in, and open up a corridor so that the ground forces can operate on the ground. And this is kind of a big idea of how the threat has changed over the last couple of years. But across the world, Army units, we seek to preserve strategic partnership, develop partner capacity. Think of what we're doing in Iraq and Afghanistan. Train and advise security forces. We work with interagency partners, and we respond to crises both at home and abroad. We deter war, and if necessary, we defeat threats. Here at home, Army North provides defense support of civil authorities. I'll talk a little bit more about our particular mission sets, but we provide this defense support of civil authorities during natural or man-made disasters. We conduct theater security cooperation, just as Army South does. We concentrate on Mexico, Canada, everything north of the Mexico-Belize-Guatemala border, whereas Mark's forces concentrate on everything south. So between our two commands, we're responsible really for the Western Hemisphere. And again, pretty significant. So that's on the theater security cooperation. We also, in our command, we're the land component for NORTHCOM, and as such, we're responsible for the land side of Homeland Defense for North America. And I can talk about missile threats, and terrorist threats, and these sorts of things. But this essentially is what we do. Now, last year we had a particularly challenging year with respect to our defense support of civil authorities mission. So defense support of civil authorities is really focused on how we support a civilian agency who's actually in charge. Usually when we think in terms of consequence management, when we're talking about that, it's FEMA. But sometimes we support the Secret Service or the FBI or some other organization. So last year, all in the month of September, we responded to Hurricane Harvey. We led the federal side of the military effort in hurricane response here in Texas, Hurricane Irma in Florida, Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands. We activated Army units and fought 2 wildfires in Oregon and California, and we supported the Secret Service as they were providing security to all of the international leaders at the United Nations General Assembly in New York City. That's all in the month of September. So we were pulled in a lot of directions at once, and in fact I was gone for a couple of months to Puerto Rico, leading the federal side of the military effort. That's Army North. I mentioned a little bit about our relations with Mexico, but we spent a lot of time and energy with the Mexican Army. What you don't read about in the paper is that we have a very close relationship with the Mexican military. We have had, 5th Army has, my command has since 1947. And a lot of this, again, you don't read about it in the paper, but they are very good at picking up bad guys. Now, when I talk about bad guys in this context, I'm not talking about drug cartels necessarily, but we call this group of people special interest aliens. They usually originate out of Afghanistan or Pakistan. They're affiliated with ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Pakistan. But the Mexican military is very good at picking them up, and they make quiet phone calls to us. The FBI then goes and picks these guys up, and they do what we would call the long course up in Buffalo, New York. But they've been very, very successful keeping these people out of our country. And it's not us or our Department of Homeland Security, although they work very closely together. It's actually the Mexican military. We just had an election in Mexico on the 1st of July. It's going to be a change in direction, and again, during questions and answers, I'm happy to address that. And then on the Homeland Defense side, we're always focused on terrorist threats, but what has gotten a lot of attention over the past couple of years is, in particular, are threats coming out of North Korea, and in particular, ballistic missile threats. And we have a system, a joint system. All the services participate, but my boss, General O'Shaughnessy, is the commander of NORTHCOM in Peterson Air Force Base. He is overall responsible for shooting down missiles when they come out of North Korea and threaten our homeland. And so we all have different parts of this with radar systems, ground-based missiles that shoot down missiles, and actually we're in pretty good shape as far as the system goes. Let me talk briefly about the other commands on Fort Sam Houston. Again, Army side, I'm not going to focus on Navy or Air Force, but on the Army side, in addition, I talked about Army North, so we also have Army South. Again, 2 theater armies, and General Stammer commands Army South. Now, Army South is, I would say, their dominant responsibility is theater security cooperation, but they do a lot of the same things, just they're focused on a different area of responsibility, south of the Mexican border, so all of Central America, all of South America. And if you look where most of our illegal immigrants are coming from, it's really 3 countries right now: Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. So with Mark's work with their militaries, what they're trying to do is help them improve the conditions at home so that, you know, we don't have as many citizens trying to get out of there because of the threats that they face. The transnational criminal organizations are really, they think of them as drug cartels, but they're not limited to one country or the other. Now in the 80s, most of the leadership came out of Colombia. That has shifted, whereas most of the leadership now comes out of Mexico, but the networks go deep into South America and work up all the way in the spine, and they send drugs in particular through the maritime approaches and the air approaches as well as across the land. But again, most importantly, what Mark does is focus on theater security cooperation with all of these different countries. He's also the land component commander for Southcom instead of Northcom. So when there are crises in Central or South America, Mark and his organization is involved. And sometimes that's, unlike where we're supporting FEMA, he's usually supporting USAID as they respond, you know, for disasters, hurricanes in Honduras, these kinds of things, earthquakes in Haiti. That's all U.S. Army South that deals with that. On the medical side, you know, we are, Fort Sam Houston is the home of military medicine. That's not just the Army side, but we do all of the vast majority of medical training for the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy, all at Fort Sam Houston. And they're actually part of a joint command under the Defense Health Agency. And again, we can talk about some of that, but very, very critical to our nation. I'll just share a statistic with you. When you look at our military occupational specialties, in other words, what each soldier does is within a certain lane: infantry, armor, field artillery, engineers, military police. Medics are our second largest specialty in the Army. Now, the first most is infantry, second are medics. We actually have more medics than field artillerymen, engineers, tankers, etc. So Fort Sam Houston is critical, and Camp Bullis plays a critical role in that because that's really where they do their field training and shoot weapons to get qualification, etc. In addition, we have Brooke Army Medical Center. Ned, I know you're in here somewhere. I saw you earlier. Okay, well, I see Mrs. Appenzeller. But Brooke Army Medical Center is absolutely incredible. It's a gem. It's a one-of-a-kind organization, and you know, I appreciate the great work of the city and all that they have done to help ensure that Brooke is capable and maintains its capability well into the future. So here's what's different about it. Brooke Army Medical Center is the military's only level 1 trauma center. Across all the services, we have only one in the entire military, and it's right here in San Antonio, Brooke Army Medical Center. And half of the trauma patients in San Antonio get treated at Brooke, and about half are at University Health Systems, and Brooke Army Medical Center takes the other half. Now, as you'd imagine, most of the people who get treatment for trauma at Brooke are not military beneficiaries. In fact, 85% of the patients are not military beneficiaries. They're people who come from, they basically, between Brooke Army Medical Center and University Health System, they've split the city in half. And we have a tremendous capability to care for trauma patients. I think the majority of the trauma patients who come into BAMC do not have health insurance. And so they get treatment for free. Now, why is it that we do that? Well, it's not just because we have big hearts or want to have good relations with the city of San Antonio. It's because it's important for our doctors, our nurses, our OR techs to get a lot of repetitions dealing with trauma. Actually, we have a lot of gunshot wounds in Brooke Army Medical Center, and I hate to say it, but that translates very well to what we need to do to prepare our doctors for what they're going to be doing in Iraq, Afghanistan, and places like this. And that's why the military has invested so much in our trauma capabilities and why we'll continue to do it well into the future. Now, the city came out and helped us last year by passing an ordinance that made it a lot tougher for other hospitals to open up a trauma center. And the reason that's important to us is because if another hospital, right now we're handling the entire, between us and University Health System, we're handling all the trauma patients. But if another hospital comes in and opens up a trauma center, the reason they would do so is essentially as a business decision to make money. The problem we have is it would take away our repetitions. And so it would hurt our ability to prepare our docs for what they need downrange. And the city has followed through and helped make this happen. And they've said to other hospitals, go open a trauma center. You have networks across the entire country. Just don't do it here, because it'll take away from our military readiness. So it's been very, very helpful. I am proud to say that your Army is prepared to deter conflict around the world tonight. And every night, but if that deterrence fails, we're prepared to fight and win as well. We're very appreciative of everything that this community and this city has done for us and helps us in building our readiness across the board. I'd like to conclude my comments by just telling you a little bit of a story. And then we'll open it up for questions. And when we talk about selfless service and sacrifice, it's okay for me to just mention these broad values and how important they are, but I want to tell you a story to maybe help bring it home a little bit. So I'm going to tell you about Todd Clark. Now, I first met Todd Clark in the summer of 2003 in Baghdad. And Todd was a great young man. He was a troop commander. Think of it as a commander of about 85 troopers, I think, in a cavalry squadron in 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, which Bob knows well. And they were in Baghdad. I was in Baghdad doing a different mission. But at the time, we were driving all over the country in old Iraqi pickup trucks, because that's what we had at the time. No armor or anything. And you may remember in the summer of 2003 and transitioning into the fall, things started getting a little sporty. And so Todd and his troop actually moved my unit around and gave us security, gave us what we would call gunship escorts, but Humvees with heavy weapons on them to help get us from place to place in what we were doing. And that was when I first met him. And then in the summer of 2004, about 2 months after I left Iraq, I became a brigade commander based here at Fort Sam Houston. And our job was to train and prepare National Guard troops from Texas, in this case, to get them ready to deploy. We did that, and a short 11 months after I had redeployed from Iraq, I was back. And this time I was with the serving as a combat advisor with the Iraqi Special Police Commandos. Todd was now in my brigade, and he was an officer on one of our 8-person teams. So we had these teams that were only 8 people initially, and we had 3 Humvees per team, and each Humvee, we had positions really that were critical for 3 people on each vehicle: a driver, what we call a TC, but the guy who's in the right seat, who's navigating and all of those things, and the gunner, the guy manning the machine gun. We only had 8 people per team, so I didn't even have enough Americans initially to man all those positions. So I'd have one of our Iraqi interpreters sit in the right seat in one of the trucks. We had no medics initially. 4 or 5 months into it, we got on our team. We got a corpsman, a junior guy. I was the senior guy as a colonel, and my junior guy was a sergeant first class, E7. So we were all very senior. Our corpsman came in. He was 19 years old, and he wanted to get on the machine gun, and none of us would let him. We made him. He was the most valuable player on our team. You're going to stay here inside this truck. But Todd, throughout this, really led by example. And there were many operations where one of us would be the only American in a house. The police commandos that we were with, the only thing police about these guys was their name. We went out most nights and dealt with bad guys. And Todd, throughout this, was an expert, and I really grew to appreciate him. And again, he was a key member of my brigade, and that was in 2005 and 2006. So the second tour that I had served with Todd in Iraq. And then in 2008, I was back in Iraq, and I was the deputy commander of 10th Mountain Division. And we were in central and southern Iraq, and I got an email from Todd, who was getting his master's degree at Naval Postgraduate School. And he was originally, even though he's a Texas A&M grad, he was originally from Albany, New York. And he really wanted to get to Fort Drum, northern New York. And my question is sanity. There's a lot of reasons why, but great outfit, but kind of the definition of lake effect snow. But Todd wanted to get stationed there, and he knew that I was the deputy commander of this outfit, and we were deployed to Iraq. And I said, well, I think I can get you here, but actually I need you in Iraq. And he was going to be graduating from Naval Postgraduate School in December. So I said, well, I think I can get you up to Fort Drum, and if you can get your family moved in and over here in January. And the reason we needed him is I needed somebody with his expertise to help us run our Iraqi security force development outfit. The people who were going to be partnered with the Iraqi police and the Iraqi army. And Todd had the clear experience to do exactly that. So we got him over, we got him family moved in, his wife Shelley, their 2 kids, to New York. He came over to Iraq and did great things until we left in the summer and redeployed, and did incredible things. And he's now a major at this point in time. And so after we got back, he went to where he wanted to go, which was a cavalry squadron. And he was a battalion S3, and the squadron had, I think about 7 months after he got back, he had to go back overseas, this time to Afghanistan. And while he was in Afghanistan, he got blown up by an IED. He survived, but spent about 3 months in Walter Reed recovering. Was partially blinded, had a tough recovery, made it back to Fort Drum, and making a long story short, was asked to go again to Afghanistan. And he went back over there and was serving as an advisor, to Afghan forces. And he reached out to me in about the April, I think, timeframe of 2013. What he was trying to do was get stationed to be the XO of the ROTC detachment at Texas A&M, where he had gone to school. So I was now a two-star commander, and so I got involved in the process to try to help get him lined up, and it looked like everything was coming together. The last time I talked to Todd was it was about 2 weeks before, or 3 weeks before he was due to deploy, right at the end of May in 2013. But I wear Todd's name on my wrist. He was killed on the 13th of June of 2013 on an insider attack in Afghanistan. And Shelley, his wife, lives here in San Antonio, and I think it was 2014. We were down here from Military District of Washington. Laura and I had dinner with her and her kids, and she gave me this bracelet, and I've never taken it off. And Shelley's a great person. Both kids now are at Texas A&M. Colin, her son, the older one, is I don't know if there's a special name for it at Texas A&M, but he's a sophomore now, and he's in the Corps of Cadets and doing great things. And there you go. And their daughter's up there as well, going to school. But when I hear words like selfless service and sacrifice, I think of people like Todd Clark. And so, these kinds of things are happening every day. They don't get a lot of attention. If you went, Central Market's right down the hill here, and if you went to Central Market and asked 100 people, I bet 50% wouldn't even know we're still in operations in Afghanistan. But it goes on today. So I don't want to end it on a downer, but I really do want to thank you for inviting us here tonight, an opportunity to spend some time with you, an opportunity to share some stories. And I want to thank you for what you do for us every single day, because you make Military City, USA, a reality. The strength of our nation is our Army. The strength of our Army is our soldiers. The strength of our soldiers is our families, and that's what makes this Army strong. Okay. Thanks. Please take your seats. We'll get some, thanks. We'll, okay, go ahead.
Going back, there's a very touching story about Todd. One of the things that Lieutenant General Guy Swan commended you about is the caissons and what you've done with those beautiful horses, people that ride by Fort Sam and close to your headquarters. Would you enlighten the group here about your role in that, what you've done here, because he commended you for bringing this in San Antonio up to the par that it is?
Well, we have, thank you. We have 2 caisson detachments in the Army. There's really only 2 that are formal government horses, caisson detachments. One is at the Old Guard, Joint Base Meyer-Henderson Hall, which is right next to Arlington Cemetery. And, the horses are either white or black. They have squads of white horses and squads of black horses. They don't mix them. But it's a pretty large organization. Laura, did you remember how many horses they had, Percherons there? It's about 60 or so horses, I think, but pretty significant organization. And they're doing we probably got 4 to 5 caisson missions every day in Arlington National Cemetery. Now, after 9/11, one of the service members from the Army who was killed in the Pentagon, her hometown was right here in San Antonio, and she was going to get buried at Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery. And the Sergeant Major of the Army at the time, and Sergeant Major Rhodes, I don't know if you can help me out, or if he's still here. Oh, there he is. Van Ottrief? Yes, sir. Okay. By the way, this guy did far more to help the caissons here than I ever did. But we started a sort of an out-of-hide organization to do the similar mission as what they were doing in Arlington National Cemetery with a caisson, so that we use that to actually bring in the casket, for a number of funerals. And right now we have a number of horses there. They're all Percherons, big black horses. And we have a detachment of 8 soldiers who do that mission. What we've done lately is to try to protect that mission, because right now they're not really on our books, and with all the cuts that we're facing, I was concerned that we were going to be losing them. So we're formalizing it. We're transferring 8 of our billets to the Old Guard, and so this caisson detachment is going to be part of the Old Guard Detachment West. They're going to be responsible it'll be actually on their books. They'll get protected in that way, and they'll stay right here at Fort Sam Houston, still do the same mission, but we'll be able to draw on the Old Guard's help for TAC, for uniforms, for training and standardization. And, one of the drivers to me in that was, I don't know how many of you know General Tom Hill, but General Hill, just as an aside, we have the second most number of general officers across all services of any city other than Washington, D.C. is here in San Antonio. It's very closely, I'll tell you, it's kind of neck and neck with San Diego, by the way. But based on that was why we kept this operation going here, is because of all these guys. And General Hill told me he changed his place of burial when he eventually passes from Arlington to Fort Sam Houston because of what we do here with the caisson detachment. So that told me how critical it was, and that's why it's going to stay. It'll be there. Yes, sir.
I had the pleasure to tour Fort Sam with Bob Nathan, and that you arranged for many of us. And would you talk a little bit about where the military is recruiting so many of their recruits today? And Bob, I believe you told me told our group that so many of the Hispanic population are really attracted to the military, and that y'all were focusing on Texas being one of your strong recruiting sites.
Yeah, so again, there's good news and bad news here. So on the good news, San Antonio is I can't say this for sure about the Navy or the Air Force, but as far as the Army, it's one of the leading producers, the San Antonio area, of recruits we have across all specialties. Very, very important. And in fact, I don't want to say our recruiters don't have to work, but comparatively, to many places in the United States, they always meet their quotas, and they have very large quotas, and there's tremendous support of the military. And a lot of it probably has to do with, we have so many veterans here. Well, go back to that family connection. But if you were to do a kind of where do most of our recruits come from, think of Montana, Idaho, come down the Rocky Mountains and go across the southern United States, and that's it. Kind of like the head of a hockey stick, right? That big chunk. But very, very few from the upper Midwest, very few from the Pacific Northwest or the left coast, and very, very few from New England. And so this is, again, it's a concern. And how many Army bases do we have in New England? The answer would be 0. We do have a Guard and Reserve bases. We used to have Fort Devens. Now that's a reserve base. But and there's a little bit more Navy and Air Force presence up there, but probably not as much as across the South. And so the Air Force is a little different because their strategic mission, there's still a lot of Air Force presence up in North Dakota and Montana, et cetera, because of, like I say, the STRATCOM mission, but the Army is not up there at all. So upper Midwest, New England, and the West Coast, even though there's a lot of population, we don't get many recruits from there. And we need to figure out how to stay in contact with them because, it's important to all of us. Yes, sir.
During your comments, you basically invited a question about relationships with Mexico, which are very important to us here in San Antonio. So I'd like to accept your invitation and ask you a question about how the elections on July 1st may affect your relations with the Mexican military.
Well, so first of all, let me say that our relations, military to military, with Mexico right now are as good as they have been at any point in time since World War II. You may not know this, but we actually had a squadron of the Mexican Air Force fly under U.S. command in the Philippines in World War II. Again, not highly publicized, but since then it's been, if you think of a sine wave, up and down, and that's what our relations have been like. But on the military to military side, now it's as strong as ever. We do a lot, Air Force, Navy, Army, and Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. Coast Guard is very engaged with the Mexican Navy, which is, honestly, it's mostly a Coast Guard, not a blue water Navy like ours, but our Navy is very engaged with them as well. So it's right now we have very strong relationships. We work together a lot. On the land side, 4 times a year we bring together the commanders of the regional commanders of the Mexican military, and with our commanders we bring in the adjutants general from Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California, and most importantly all our partners in Department of Homeland Security, especially the Border Patrol, and we help tie these guys together so that the guys on one side of the border in McAllen, Texas, I'll be in McAllen next week doing this partnership. But the guy on our side of the border, the people responsible is Homeland Security. On their side, it's dominantly the Mexican military. The police in the cities, but outside the cities, it's really SEDENA, the Army. And so we help bring them together so that they can communicate and operate. And actually very effective using our surveillance systems. We'll see something on the south side of the border. A Border Patrol agent will give his counterpart in the Mexican Army a call, and they'll go in and get somebody. And so it's that kind of real-time intelligence sharing that makes a difference. That's where we are today. Where are we going? Solo Dios Saba. So only God knows. I'm not really sure. Now, what we think, even though Manuel Lopez Obrador got elected with first of all, very high voter turnout. I think 63% or something of the country turned out, which is the highest they've ever had. And he overwhelmingly got the majority, 53% of the vote. And it wasn't just for the presidency, but also for the legislative branch. And so he's got a mandate. And the people of Mexico think that the leadership of both PAN and PRI, the 2 previous parties, has led them astray with respect to corruption and all kinds of things. So he got elected with a mandate to change this. Now it's interesting, if you look at his rhetoric over the years, he is thought of as a leftist guy, but if you watch his tone, it changed over the past year quite a bit. And he's seen more and more as a nationalist. Personally, we believe he's very conservative. And so, we also think this is going to shape how he's going to do things. Our best estimate right now is that, like we do for every change in administration, the Mexican president is elected for 1 term only of 6 years, and they can't be reelected. But every time we do this, we have a little bit of a dip in our military to military relationship as the new team gets on board. They slow things down until they can figure things out, and then they tend to ramp it up. And we think, honestly, we're going to be right back to the races. So we think that's what's most likely. I can share with you one thing. General Cienfuegos, who's the head of the Army, he's also the head of the Air Force, he's also the Secretary of Defense, and he's essentially the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to put it in U.S. terms, General Cienfuegos. I had a conversation with him. I've talked to him a lot over the last couple of years, but in particular, we were in Washington, D.C. for the 75th anniversary of the Inter-American Defense Board, and I had a meeting with him, and I wanted to share with him some things that we had coming up on training and on conferences and what we were doing to help them get an air defense radar, which the Air Force did in fact provide them. He really had only one point to me. And he said, no matter what happens between politicians, we need to fight to keep our military-to-military relationships strong. And so that's what we've been doing.
General, thank you for your service. President Trump has come down, probably rightfully so, pretty hard on NATO because a lot of countries have not been paying their fair share for defense spending. Is this, I've heard this for years, but is this correct? And if so, what besides the rhetoric can we do to get these people to tee it up?
So what I can say is I know the president has, a number of presidents over the years have had different means of trying to encourage NATO members for meeting their requirement, which is 2% of their budget, essentially going to military. There are a few countries who meet it now. What I do know is over the past year, that percentage has gone up, and actually a number of countries are committing more and more higher percentages of their defense budget to NATO. So I think that's important. I'm way out of my depth if I try to talk about, what more can be done to work, with our NATO partners, because I'm not even really aligned with NATO right now. But obviously the president just has returned from a NATO summit, and I know it's very important to our country, and that encouragement is or forceful attitudes, whatever words you want to use, has had an effect, and it's had a positive effect.
Boss here, this is one of the president's office, so one more question, then we got to feed everybody. Okay?
Sir.
I didn't say it publicly. It's about how good you are. He was saying take a question.
Oh,
One more question. One question.
I have one.
Yes, Jeannie.
What can we do for you? What can we do for you? What can we in San Antonio do for you? What do you need from us?
Martini?
So thanks. I think once a year or so, and I'd have to defer to Bob on the timing, but once a year or so, we have this trip from the city called San Antonio to DC, and some of the leaders and dominantly elected officials, I believe, within the city make a trip to Washington, D.C. and again, focus mostly on the military side, but Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps. What I think where we can use your help is to ensure that we have a kind of a synchronized message, that group goes up there with something that includes all of our interests and the city's interests together, because sometimes they have conflicting messages within their own group, and that isn't helpful to actually bring things about and make things happen.
How do we fix that?
Well, I think that we can have some forums where we work with you, but we directly work with the leadership of the city and the members of the council and the mayor to ensure that we have and draw from all of the points that are important, not just from Laura Linderman, but also from General Quast, because he's got a different focus. And so we've got different things that are important to each of our commands, and we need to bring them together. And what you can help with, I think, Jeannie, is just in ensuring that, that the members of the city council and the mayor make time for us to have that discussion, so that they don't.
Make that happen.
Okay.
Everyone in this room can, we know.